There's no anguish quite like watching a movie that's very clearly saddled with a distinctive anchor around its neck, a single element that just drags the whole thing down into mediocrity or even flat-out awfulness. And in the case of the following 8 movies, we're talking about that one character who pulled off the almost impressive achievement of single-handedly sabotaging their films. And with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 horror movie characters that single-handedly ruined recent movies. Number 8. Rebecca Renfield. Awkwafina is certainly a talented and very funny actress, but recent horror comedy Renfield absolutely didn't need her traffic cop character Rebecca at all. See, Renfield was kind of a baffling movie of two halves, dividing itself between the thoroughly entertaining toxic workplace satire of Renfield and Dracula's relationship, and a tired, generic crime thriller in which Rebecca takes on mobster Tedward Lobo. There are far too many moments in the movie where the focus just shifts explicitly to Rebecca and her less-than subplot, in turn stealing precious screen time away from Renfield and Dracula. And of course, nobody compelled to see a film called Renfield had any desire to watch this awkwardly shoehorned cops and criminals plot, which feels so out of place as to suggest that the script might be two cast-off screenplays combined into one ill-fitting whole. Again, Awkwafina definitely isn't the problem here, it's just her character's existence in this particular movie at all. Number 7. Sally Hardesty, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In recent times, no iconic horror movie character has been assassinated with quite such misguided vigor as Sally Hardesty in last year's Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel. Much like Halloween 2018's Laurie Strode, Sally in this movie is now an aged, hardened survivalist who has been waiting literally decades for a final showdown with her tormentor Leatherface. And so in the third act, Sally finally gets her wish, yet picks up the idiot ball with an enthusiasm bordering on suicidal. Despite having had almost an entire half-century to prep for this fight, Sally ultimately waits far too long to strike, instead holding Leatherface at gunpoint when she could just be killing him. Even when she does decide to shoot, her aim absolutely sucks, before she ends up being run through by Leatherface's chainsaw, dying shortly thereafter. The movie took a character who was smart, resourceful, and easy to root for in her youth, and turned her into a doddering fool with a needless death that was a pure character assassination. Number 6. Herman Monster, The Munsters. Rob Zombie's live-action adaptation of The Munsters is objectively well, it's a film alright, and I suppose that's as nice as I can be about it. However, with the Munsters being as iconic as they are, nothing was more important in this movie than getting the casting right. And though Daniel Roebuck was perfectly cast as the Count, and Sherry Moon fared well as Lily Munster, it all fell apart with Herman. Even if you can forgive the hilariously cheap makeup used to bring the character to life, the performance here just strays too damn far from the iconic Fred Gwynne rendition of Herman, with his goofier, more gratingly playful, high-pitched voice. For as much as Zombie does get wrong throughout the entire movie, the embarrassingly low production values and hokey script wouldn't be so bothersome if it actually nailed the fundamentals of its primary characters. Lily and the Count are fine enough, but Herman, he's just kinda terrible. Number 5. Wayne Bailey, Scream 6. If you've watched this channel for a while, you might have guessed that I'm a pretty big Scream 6 defender. I personally thought it was a big step up from the 2022 sequel, delivering exceptional scares and a brutal version of Ghostface. That said, even I can't defend the final reveal, which sucks all the air out of everything you've just seen. That's because, while there are 3 killers this time around, the reveal that the ringleader is none other than police detective Wayne Bailey is a complete dud. Not only is it just painfully obvious, but the explanation that he's actually Richie's dad, the killer from the previous film, repeats a similar plot point from Scream 2. And because this time around the film teased a completely new motivation, with the killer literally saying to the camera, "Who gives a fuck about movies?" in the introduction, implying that we would be breaking away from the franchise conventions, it's a disappointing way to tie things up. Unfortunately as well, it's just Bailey himself that makes it all not work. The hammy performance of the actor feels like it's from a completely different film, and out of step with the brutal intimidation that we'd seen previously. Number 4. Riley McKendry, Hellraiser. Last year's Hellraiser reboot was certainly an improvement upon the glut of terrible, increasingly low-budget sequels of recent years, but that's an insanely low bar to clear. Though the new Hellraiser looked great and benefited from a suitably imposing performance by Jamie Clayton as Pinhead, the human characters were a real drag. Above all others though, protagonist Riley was a total wet blanket. Now, in theory, a recovering drug addict going on a journey of self-betterment through their use of the series' iconic puzzle box isn't an awful idea. Yet after a while, Riley's routinely poor decision-making becomes draining to sit through. Sure, you could argue that she is a refreshingly realistic and imperfect final girl to a point, but when stood next to the franchise's original hero, that being, of course, the terrifically sympathetic and likable Kirsty Cotton, Riley just can't help but seem like a frustratingly thin sketch of a character. For all of the good that the movie did on the Pinhead side of the equation, its empathy for its flesh and blood characters wasn't nearly as successful. Number 3, John Rainbird Firestarter. Last year's Firestarter remake had a lot of potential, yet was pretty much a non-starter for many fans due to the changes that it made to one key character from both Stephen King's novel and the original 1984 film. In this remake, the character of John Rainbird is reimagined from a mere assassin sent to track pyrokinetic Charlie down to being a superpowered individual in his own right. In addition to being a telepathic assassin, in sharp contrast from the book and prior film, it ends not with Charlie killing him by setting him on fire, but effectively befriending him. Now, none of these changes felt even remotely earned or sufficiently fleshed out, ensuring that fans of the source material were left wondering why they were made at all, beyond being just different for different's sake. Now, this is another one that's absolutely no fault of the actor, who is terrific in his own right, but the character as written here may as well have had a different name entirely. Number 2, Cory Cunningham, Halloween Ends. Right up until the heated death of the universe, organisms are still going to be trying to figure out what the hell David Gordon Green was thinking with Cory Cunningham in Halloween Ends. Basically, the final Halloween film shoves Laurie Strode and Michael Myers to the periphery to focus the story instead on this entirely new character. While the idea of a traumatized town turning all of its grief and rage against Cory, a young man involved in an accident which caused the death of a local boy 3 years prior, does have potential, it ultimately doesn't really go anywhere interesting. Instead, Cory embarks on a rushed, unconvincing romance with Laurie's granddaughter Allison, gets beaten up by some band geeks, briefly dons the Michael Myers garb, and then just dies a forgettable death at the hands of Michael. Though some fans did praise Green for taking the film in a wildly unexpected direction, making 2 central characters supporting players in their own franchise in favour of this relatively uninteresting guy whose arc ends up falling totally flat was, well, it was a choice, alright. Number 1, Dr. Leslie Monroe, We Have a Ghost. Netflix's new horror comedy, We Have a Ghost, received a fair pummeling from critics and audiences alike, with the primary complaint being the film's brutally overbaked 127-minute runtime. This thing should have been a tight 90 minutes tops, all the more so given how obnoxiously blatant the excessive material is. Not merely content to be a Beetlejuice-esque haunted house comedy, the film comes packed with a woefully tiresome CIA plot, as villainous horror writer Dr. Leslie Monroe attempts to restart a CIA ghost hunting op. Now again, actor Tig Notaro is absolutely great, but her talents are aggressively wasted here on a character whose entire aura just drags the film from passably watchable into excruciatingly, even punishingly tedious. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did these characters work for you? And have you seen any horror movie where you just think, oh, I could enjoy this so much if they weren't in it? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists like this on the regular. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.